My name is Vera, and for 17 years, I lived in a house with a door I was never allowed to open. The brass handle had turned green with age, and dust gathered in the keyhole like secrets waiting to spill. Every morning, I'd walk past my parents' bedroom door on my way to school, and every evening, I'd hear the soft click of the lock turning from the inside. Mom and Dad slept in the guest room downstairs, claiming the upstairs was too drafty for their old bones. But I knew better. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, our two-story colonial house on Maple Street was the talk of the neighborhood, not for its peeling white paint or overgrown garden, but for the mystery that hung over it like morning fog. Mrs. Henderson next door would peek through her curtains whenever she thought no one was looking, and the mailman, Old Pete, always lingered a little too long on our front porch, as if he could sense something wasn't right. I was 5 when the lock first appeared. I remember because it was the same week we stopped talking about Danny. Danny, my older brother, had been everything to me, my protector, my best friend, my partner in crime when we'd sneak cookies from Mom's kitchen jar. He taught me how to ride my bike without training wheels, how to catch fireflies in mason jars, and how to make shadow puppets on the bedroom wall when thunderstorms kept me awake. Then one morning, he just wasn't there anymore. Danny went away, Mom would say whenever I asked, her voice flat as Kansas wheat. He's not coming back. Dad would just grunt and disappear behind his newspaper, the Springfield Herald crackling like old bones. They packed away his things, his baseball glove, his collection of Hot Wheels cars, his favorite Chicago Cubs jersey, everything that proved Danny had ever existed. The house felt hollow without his laughter echoing through the halls. By the time I turned 16, I'd learned to stop asking questions. But the silence in our house had weight to it, pressing down on my chest until some nights I could barely breathe. Mom moved through the rooms like a ghost, preparing meals no one really tasted, meatloaf on Mondays, tuna casserole on Wednesdays, pot roast on Sundays. Dad worked longer hours at the John Deere dealership, coming home smelling of motor oil and regret. The locked door became my obsession. I'd press my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything, footsteps, voices, even the creak of floorboards settling. But there was only silence, thick and suffocating. On my 17th birthday, something changed. As I blew out the candles on my grocery store cake, I made a wish that would alter everything. I wished for the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. That night, I heard it for the first time, a soft tapping coming from behind the locked door, like fingernails against glass. 3 taps, then silence. 3 taps again. It was Danny's old signal, the one he used when he wanted to sneak into my room for midnight adventures. The tapping continued for 3 weeks, always at 2:17 a.m., always the same pattern. 3 soft knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I started keeping a notebook under my pillow, marking each occurrence like a prisoner counting days on a cell wall. Mom and Dad never mentioned hearing anything. They moved through our house on Maple Street like sleepwalkers, Dad with his coffee and morning crossword, Mom with her endless loads of laundry that never seemed to get clean. But I caught them sometimes, their eyes darting toward the ceiling when they thought I wasn't looking, their conversations stopping mid-sentence whenever I entered a room. "It's just the house settling," Dad would mumble when I finally worked up the courage to ask about the sounds. "Old houses make noise, Vera. Nothing more. But old houses don't tap in patterns. Old houses don't whisper names at 3 in the morning. And old houses don't leave handprints on dusty windows where no one should be able to reach." I started skipping classes at Cedar Falls High, telling my teachers I had migraines. Really, I was conducting my own investigation. While Mom volunteered at the church soup kitchen and Dad sold tractors to farmers, I searched our house like a detective, looking for clues about what happened 17 years ago. In the basement, behind a stack of moldy Christmas decorations, I found a box labeled DM in Mom's careful handwriting. Danny Michael, his full name. My hands shook as I lifted the cardboard lid, half expecting it to be empty like everything else connected to my brother. But it wasn't empty. Inside were things they'd missed when they erased him from our lives. His birth certificate. Report cards from Jefferson Elementary, all A's and B's, teacher comments praising his gentle spirit and helpful nature. A photo of him at age 12, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, wearing that Cubs jersey that used to hang in his closet. And at the bottom, a newspaper clipping from the Cedar Falls Gazette, dated 18 years ago. The headline made my blood turn to ice water: "Local boy, 13, dies in tragic accident." The article was brief, clinical in the way small-town newspapers handle family tragedies. Daniel Michael Thompson, age 13, son of Robert and Linda Thompson of 412 Maple Street, had died from injuries sustained in a fall down the stairs. He was survived by his parents and younger sister Vera, age 4. But I remembered no fall. I remembered no accident. I remembered Danny being there one day and gone the next, like he'd been erased by some cosmic pencil. The tapping that night was different, urgent, insistent. Not 3 knocks, but 5. Then 7. Then 10, so fast they blurred together into a frantic drumbeat that seemed to shake the walls. I couldn't take it anymore. At 2:30 a.m., while my parents slept their guilty sleep downstairs, I crept up to the locked door with a bobby pin and a kitchen knife I'd stolen from Mom's silverware drawer. My hands were steady as I worked the lock, muscle memory from all those times Danny had taught me to pick the latch on his treasure box where he kept his allowance money. The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. The smell hit me first, not decay or death like I'd expected, but something worse. The smell of time standing still, of air that hadn't moved in 17 years, of secrets rotting in darkness. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting everything in silver and shadow. And there, in the center of the room, was my parents' old bed, the one they'd abandoned when Danny died. But Danny wasn't dead. He sat on the edge of the mattress, exactly as I remembered him, 13 years old, wearing his Cubs jersey and those ratty sneakers he'd refused to throw away. His dark hair fell across his forehead the same way it always had, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were the same warm brown I'd dreamed about for 17 years. "Vera," he said, and his voice was exactly the same, unchanged by time or whatever had kept him in this room. "You finally came." I wanted to run to him, to throw my arms around him and sob into his shoulder like I had when I was little and the world seemed too big and scary. But something held me back, some instinct that whispered this wasn't right, this couldn't be real. "Danny," I whispered, my voice cracking like thin ice. "How are you here? The newspaper, it said you died." He smiled, but it was wrong somehow, like a photograph that's been left in the sun too long. "I did die, Vera. Right here in this room. But they wouldn't let me go." He gestured around the bedroom, and for the first time, I really looked at it. Everything was exactly as it had been 17 years ago, Mom's romance novels stacked on her nightstand, Dad's reading glasses folded on the dresser, their wedding photo in its silver frame. Even the calendar on the wall was turned to September 2007, the month Danny died. "They locked me in here," Danny continued, his voice carrying a weight that 13-year-olds shouldn't possess. "They couldn't let me go, couldn't accept what happened. So they kept me here, kept me trapped between living and dying." "I don't understand," I said, stepping closer despite every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. You look alive." "Do I?" Danny stood up, and I noticed he cast no shadow in the moonlight. "Look closer, Vera. Really look." I forced myself to study my brother's face, the face I'd missed every day for 17 years. Slowly, like adjusting the focus on a camera, I began to see what was really there. The pale blue tinge to his skin. The way the moonlight seemed to pass through him rather than fall on him. The stillness in his chest where breath should be. "Oh God," I breathed. "They won't let me rest," Danny said, and now I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been awake for far too long. "Every night, they come up here and talk to me like I'm still alive. They bring me food I can't eat, clothes I can't wear. They've been having conversations with my corpse for 17 years. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. "Your corpse." Danny pointed to the closet door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see something that made my stomach lurch, a glimpse of fabric, a flash of bone white. "They couldn't bury me," Danny whispered. "Couldn't say goodbye. So they keep me here, keep pretending everything's normal while my body." He gestured helplessly toward the closet. I understood then with horrible clarity, why my parents had moved to the guest room, why they'd locked this door, why they'd forbidden me from ever entering. They weren't sleeping in here because they couldn't bear the memories. They were sleeping in here because they couldn't bear to leave Danny alone. "How long have you known?" I asked, sinking into Mom's old rocking chair, the one she used to sit in when she'd read me bedtime stories. The wood creaked under my weight, a sound from a simpler time. Danny moved to the window, staring out at the street where we used to play hopscotch and chase ice cream trucks. In the moonlight, he looked more translucent, like morning mist that might disappear with the sunrise. "I've always known," he said. "Death isn't like falling asleep, Vera. There's no peaceful darkness, no dreams. I've been aware of every moment since the accident, aware of Mom crying over my body, of Dad carrying me up these stairs, of them making their terrible decision." "What terrible decision?" Danny turned back to me, and I saw tears on his cheeks, or what would have been tears if ghosts could cry. "They had a choice. They could let me go, let the coroner take me, let Cedar Falls give me a proper burial. Or they could keep me here, in this room, where they could pretend I was just sleeping." I thought about all those nights I'd heard them moving around upstairs, the soft murmur of voices, the creak of floorboards. I'd assumed they were finally sleeping in their own bed again. Instead, they'd been up here every night for 17 years, talking to their dead son. "They bring me dinner," Danny continued, his voice hollow. "Mom makes my favorite, mac and cheese with those little hot dogs cut up in it. She sets the plate right there on the nightstand and tells me about her day at the church, about Mrs. Henderson's garden, about how proud she is of you. And Dad? Dad reads me the sports section from the Herald, tells me about the Cubs season like I might care about batting averages." The horror of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. "Danny, that's insane." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They lost their minds the day I died, Vera. Completely, utterly lost them. But their love was so strong it wouldn't let me go. It trapped me here, between worlds, neither alive nor properly dead." I looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. The fresh flowers in the vase, Mom must replace them every few days. The library books stacked on Dad's side of the bed, new releases he thought Danny might enjoy. The small television in the corner, probably tuned to Cubs games all summer long. They'd turned their bedroom into a shrine, but worse than that, they'd made it a prison. "The night you died," I said carefully, "what really happened?" Danny's expression darkened. "I was coming upstairs to get my baseball glove from Mom and Dad's room. We'd left it under their bed after playing catch that afternoon. The stairs were wet, Mom had been mopping. I slipped." He pointed to a spot near the dresser where the hardwood floor met the wall. "I hit my head right there. The corner of the dresser caught me just wrong. It should have been quick, should have been easy. But Mom found me first. And she wouldn't accept it. She carried me to their bed, laid me down like I was just hurt, not gone. When Dad came home from work, she told him I was sleeping. By the time they realized the truth, she'd convinced him we could keep it secret. Just for a few days, just until they figured out what to do. But a few days became 17 years. Danny nodded. They told everyone I'd gone to live with relatives in California. Faked letters, made up stories about my new school, my new friends. The whole town believes I'm alive and well in San Francisco, probably married with kids by now. The tapping I'd been hearing, it wasn't Danny trying to get out. It was him trying to get my attention, trying to find someone who could help him find peace. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Danny looked at me with eyes that held 17 years of exhaustion, 17 years of being trapped between love and letting go. "I need you to kill me, Vera. Really kill me this time. Set me free." The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. "I can't," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Danny, I can't do that. You're my brother." "I'm not your brother anymore," he said gently, floating closer to where I sat frozen in Mom's rocking chair. "I'm a ghost wearing his face, a memory that's gone bad. Your real brother died 17 years ago on these floorboards. What I am now, this isn't living, Vera. This isn't even existing. This is suffering." Through the window, I could hear the first stirrings of dawn, birds chirping in Mrs. Henderson's oak tree, the distant rumble of delivery trucks heading to Miller's grocery. Soon, Mom would be up making coffee in her favorite mug, the one with faded daisies that Danny had given her for Mother's Day when he was 8. Dad would shuffle downstairs in his ratty bathrobe, already reaching for the newspaper to check the Cubs box score. And then they'd come upstairs, like they had every morning for 17 years, to say good morning to their dead son. "They'll never let you go," I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "As long as they're alive, they'll keep you trapped here." Danny nodded sadly. "Their love is stronger than death, but it's not the kind of love that heals. It's the kind that wounds, that holds on so tight it strangles. They can't let me rest because letting me rest means admitting I'm gone. And admitting I'm gone means admitting they've been talking to a corpse for nearly 2 decades. I stood up and walked to the closet door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. "Show me," I said. "Vera, you don't need to." "Show me, Danny. If you want me to help you, I need to see all of it." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Open it." I pulled the closet door wide, and the smell hit me like a physical blow, not the rot I'd expected, but something else. Chemicals. Preservatives. The sharp scent of embalming fluid. Danny's body lay on a makeshift bed inside the closet, dressed in fresh clothes that Mom must change regularly. His skin was waxy, artificial-looking, like a mannequin in a department store window. His hair had been combed, his face peaceful, but there was something fundamentally wrong about the whole scene. "They've been preserving you?" "Dad has a friend who works at Morrison's funeral home," Danny explained, his ghost form standing beside me as we both stared at his corpse. "Tom Williams. He comes by once a month, helps them, maintain things. Keeps me from decaying, keeps me looking like I'm just sleeping." The full scope of my parents' madness crystallized before me. They hadn't just kept Danny's body, they'd been actively preserving it, paying someone to help them maintain their delusion. For 17 years, they'd been living with a mummified child in their bedroom closet, talking to him every night like he might answer back. "They're completely insane," I breathed. "They're completely heartbroken," Danny corrected. "There's a difference. They love me so much they can't let me die. But Vera, I need to die. I need to rest. I need to go wherever souls go when they're finished with this world." I closed the closet door, unable to look anymore. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Destroy the body," Danny said simply. "It's what's keeping me anchored here. As long as my physical form exists, as long as Mom and Dad can touch it and pretend I'm alive, I can't move on. But if you destroy it, they'll know what I did. They'll hate me forever. Maybe. Or maybe they'll finally be able to grieve properly, to let me go, to start living again instead of just existing in this house of ghosts." From downstairs came the familiar sounds of morning, the coffee maker gurgling to life, Dad's heavy footsteps on the kitchen linoleum, Mom humming an old hymn as she started breakfast. Soon they'd be up here, and I'd have to watch them have conversations with thin air while their son's preserved corpse lay hidden in the closet. "How?" I asked. Danny smiled, and for the first time since I'd opened the door, it looked genuine. "Fire," he said. "It's the only way to make sure there's nothing left to preserve, nothing left to keep me tied to this place. You'll have to burn the whole room. The house will burn down. Mom and Dad could die. Not if you're smart about it. Wait until they go to church on Sunday morning. They're always gone for 3 hours, service, then coffee and donuts in the fellowship hall. You'll have time to set the fire and call the fire department. Tell them you were out, came home to find the upstairs in flames. They'll save the house, but this room will be gone. And so will I." I sank back into the rocking chair, overwhelmed. "I need time to think." "Time is the one thing I don't have anymore," Danny said. "Every day I stay trapped here is another day Mom and Dad can't heal, another day you have to live in a house full of secrets and lies. Every day I exist like this, I become less of who I was and more of something else. Something that might not want to leave when the chance comes." "What do you mean?" But Danny was already fading as the sunlight grew stronger, becoming translucent as tissue paper. "Sunday, Vera. Please. Set me free." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in a room that smelled of death and desperate love. I spent the week watching my parents with new eyes, seeing the madness that had been hiding in plain sight. Every morning, they climbed the stairs together after breakfast, Mom carrying a plate of fresh fruit and Dad with his coffee and newspaper. They'd disappear into their old bedroom for exactly 1 hour, their voices a low murmur through the walls. When they came back down, Mom's eyes would be red-rimmed, and Dad would retreat to his workshop in the garage, tinkering with old lawn-mower engines until dinner time. At night, the ritual repeated. They'd say goodnight to me around 9, then head upstairs with more food, more conversation topics, more desperate attempts to keep their dead son company. Sometimes I'd hear Mom reading aloud, children's books at first, then young adult novels as the years passed, now college-level textbooks as if Danny was growing up alongside his corpse. Wednesday night, I caught Dad in the kitchen at 2 a.m., warming up a bowl of tomato soup. For Danny, he explained when he saw me, not even trying to lie anymore. He always liked soup when he had trouble sleeping. Thursday, I found Mom in the garage, spray painting a new baseball glove Cubs blue. His old one was getting worn, she said, not meeting my eyes. Growing boys need proper equipment. By Friday, I understood that Danny was right. They were completely lost in their delusion. More than that, they were getting worse. 17 years of talking to a ghost had eroded their grip on reality so thoroughly that I wasn't sure they even remembered he was dead. In their minds, he was just their shy teenage son who stayed in his room too much, who didn't like coming downstairs for family dinners. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical October weather in Cedar Falls. Mom put on her best dress, navy blue with white flowers, the one she always wore to church. Dad struggled with his tie, the same clip-on he'd been wearing since before I was born. "We'll be back around noon," Mom said, kissing my forehead. "There's leftover pot roast in the fridge if you get hungry." "And don't go upstairs," Dad added, like he had every Sunday for 17 years. "Danny needs his rest." I watched from the living room window as their ancient Buick LeSabre pulled out of the driveway, Mom waving from the passenger seat like this was any other Sunday, like their whole world wasn't built on a foundation of lies and preserved death. Then I went to the kitchen and gathered what I needed. The gas can from Dad's garage, still half full from the last time he'd filled the lawnmower. A book of matches from Miller's grocery. An old towel to soak in gasoline. My hands were steady as I climbed the stairs, steadier than they'd been all week. Danny was waiting for me in the bedroom, more solid than he'd appeared since that first night. "You came." "I keep my promises," I said, though we both knew I'd never actually promised him anything. "Are you sure about this, Vera? Once you light that match, there's no going back. Mom and Dad will know what you did." I looked around the room one last time, at the fresh flowers Mom had arranged yesterday, at the stack of college brochures Dad had been collecting for a boy who would never turn 18, at the closet door that hid 17 years of desperate love and careful preservation. "Maybe it's time they knew," I said. I doused the bed with gasoline, the smell sharp and chemical in the still air. The towel soaked up the fuel like a thirsty plant, and when I tossed it onto the mattress, the gas began to pool and spread, darkening the wedding quilt Mom had made when she and Dad were young and normal and didn't yet know that love could become a prison. "Will it hurt?" I asked, suddenly afraid. Danny shook his head. "I'm already dead, remember? This is just completion. Like closing a book that's been left open too long." I struck the match, the flame dancing yellow and hungry in the dim room. For a moment, I hesitated. This was my parents' bedroom, the place where they'd dreamed of growing old together, where they'd made plans for a future that got derailed by a terrible accident and their inability to let go. But it was also Danny's prison, and mine too, in a way. We'd all been trapped by their refusal to grieve properly, their insistence on keeping death at bay through sheer force of will. "I love you, Danny," I whispered. "I love you too, little sister. Thank you for setting me free." I dropped the match. The flames took hold faster than I'd expected, racing across the gasoline-soaked quilt and up the curtains with a hunger that seemed almost alive. Within seconds, the entire room was ablaze, the heat pushing me back toward the door as smoke began to fill the air. I ran downstairs and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I reported the fire. "Please hurry," I told the dispatcher. "The whole upstairs is going up." Then I sat on the front porch and waited. The Cedar Falls Fire Department arrived in minutes, their sirens wailing through the quiet Sunday morning neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson came running from next door in her bathrobe, and old Pete the mailman stopped his car in the middle of Maple Street to gawk at the flames shooting from our second-story windows. "Anyone inside?" Chief Martinez asked me as his crew unrolled their hoses. "No," I said. "Just me," and I got out when I smelled the smoke. They saved the house. The flames were contained to the upstairs bedroom, though smoke and water damage spread throughout the second floor. By the time Mom and Dad's Buick pulled into the driveway, the fire was out and the investigation was beginning. I'll never forget the look on Mom's face when she saw the smoke pouring from what used to be their bedroom window. She didn't scream or cry, she just stood there in her Sunday dress, staring up at the destruction with an expression of absolute emptiness. Dad was different. He ran toward the house, shouting Danny's name, trying to push past the firefighters who held him back. "My boy," he screamed. "My boy is up there." "Sir, there's no one upstairs," Chief Martinez tried to explain. "Your daughter says she doesn't know." Dad fought against the arms restraining him, his face red with panic and fury. "Danny's up there. He's in his room. You have to save him." That's when I saw Mom really look at me for the first time since arriving home. Her eyes narrowed, and I watched understanding dawn across her face like sunrise over a graveyard. "What did you do?" she whispered. "The investigation was brief. Old houses catch fire sometimes, especially when they have faulty wiring and decades of accumulated dust and neglect. The fire marshal found the gas can in the garage, noted that it was missing some fuel, but couldn't prove anything. Accidents happen. Teenagers make mistakes. Sometimes a girl just wants to light a candle in her parents' old bedroom and things get out of hand." I stuck to my story. I'd smelled smoke, run upstairs to investigate, found the room already in flames, and barely escaped. There was no evidence to contradict me, no reason to suspect arson. The official report listed the cause as undetermined, possibly electrical. But Mom and Dad knew. They knew, and in knowing, they finally had to confront the truth they'd been avoiding for 17 years. The truth about Danny's death, about their own madness, about the impossibility of keeping someone alive through sheer force of will. The house was rebuilt, the upstairs bedroom restored to its original layout. But my parents never moved back into it. They stayed in the guest room downstairs, and sometimes I'd catch them staring up at the ceiling like they were listening for sounds that would never come again. Dad started seeing a therapist in Des Moines, Dr. Patricia Wells, who specialized in complicated grief. Mom joined a support group at the Methodist Church, a circle of other parents who'd lost children and were learning to live with the hole their absence left behind. They never forgave me, how could they? But they never blamed me either. Perhaps they understood, in some deep part of themselves, that I'd done what they couldn't. I'd let Danny go. And Danny was gone. Really gone this time. The tapping stopped, the whispers ceased, the sense of being watched from empty doorways faded like morning mist. Our house felt normal for the first time in my memory, sad, but normal. The kind of sadness that comes from loss, not the twisted desperation that comes from refusing to accept it. On quiet nights, when the wind blows through the oak trees on Maple Street, I sometimes think I hear Danny's voice carried on the breeze. Not trapped or pleading, but free. Happy. At peace in whatever place souls go when they're finally allowed to rest. I'm 25 now, married to a good man named James who works at the bank downtown. We have a daughter of our own, Emma Rose, 3 years old, with Danny's dark hair and curious eyes. Sometimes, when I'm rocking her to sleep in the old nursery, I tell her stories about her Uncle Danny, the brother I lost and found and lost again. I tell her about the summer he taught me to catch fireflies, about the way he could make shadow puppets dance on the wall, about his laugh that sounded like wind chimes on a breezy day. I tell her the good memories, the real ones, not the desperate fantasies my parents clung to for 17 years. And when she asks why Uncle Danny went away, I tell her the truth. Sometimes people we love have to leave, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean they stop loving us. It just means they're waiting for us somewhere else, somewhere better, where they don't hurt anymore. Emma Rose nods like she understands, and maybe she does. Children are closer to the truth than adults sometimes, less afraid of the mysteries we can't solve or control. Mom and Dad are better now, not healed, maybe never fully healed, but better. They visit Danny's grave at Restland Cemetery every Sunday after church, leaving flowers and quiet prayers instead of trying to have conversations with the dead. They're learning to remember him as he was, not as they wished he could still be. And me? I'm learning that love sometimes means letting go, that the bravest thing you can do for someone is give them permission to leave. I carry Danny with me not in some desperate attempt to keep him alive, but in the stories I tell, the memories I cherish, the way I try to love my own daughter with an open hand instead of a closed fist. The house on Maple Street still stands, white paint fresh and gardens tended. But there are no more locked doors, no more forbidden rooms, no more secrets rotting in the darkness. There's just love, finally free to be what it was always meant to be, not a prison, but a bridge. A way of staying connected across the vast distance between here and wherever souls go when their stories in this world are finally, peacefully complete.